Welcome, everyone, to the Q&A session for our upcoming course, The Wild Goddesses and Mystics of Mercy Soul Sanctuary, the 6-month refuge for sacred feminine teaching, community, and intimacy with the beloved. I'm Lisa Bonnice, and I'm really looking forward to hosting this Q&A conversation for the Shift Network, where we'll explore the teachings of Mirabai Starr and address questions about her upcoming 6-month live video course, The Wild Goddesses and Mystics of Mercy Soul Sanctuary, which begins Wednesday, August 29th. Later, I'll explain how you can participate in this course, even if you can't attend the live sessions. But first, I want to introduce our guest. Mirabai Starr writes creative nonfiction and contemporary translations of sacred literature. She taught philosophy and world religions at the University of New Mexico, Taos, for 20 years, and now teaches and speaks internationally on contemplative practice and interspiritual dialogue. A certified bereavement counselor, Mirabai helps mourners harness the transformational power of loss. She's received critical acclaim for her revolutionary new translations of the mystics John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, and Julian of Norwich. She's the award-winning author of several books, including Caravan of No Despair, a memoir of loss and transformation. Her latest book, Wild Mercy, Living the Fierce and Tender Wisdom of the Women Mystics, will be published in the spring of 2019. And in just a few minutes, we're going to open up for your questions. But first, I want to welcome Mirabai. She's going to begin our call by leading us in a sort of a mini teaching and a devotional practice to open to the beloved. Welcome, Mirabai. It is always such a delight to spend time with you.
Thank you, Lisa. It's wonderful to be here with you and with all of you. I'm really looking forward to hearing what's on your minds and hearts today. So before we begin, I'd like to invite us to turn inward and connect with that place from which all of these teachings emerges and to which they return, to that place of deep inner stillness, but also inner fire. So rather than just talking about the mystics, what we're doing is we are connecting with that vast heart space where the mystics dwell and where all that juicy love poetry comes from, and where our own souls find both sustenance but also that ache of yearning that leads to connection. So I'm actually going to invite you into that ache of yearning now. Let's just go there. Even if you haven't spent time in that place in your heart for a long, long time, you know, many of us began our spiritual practice, our spiritual life, perhaps in our youth. Maybe not, maybe it was later in adulthood, but it often begins, our spiritual quest often begins with a feeling of disconnection, of being out of sync with the way things are, and wanting, deeply wanting connection with the sacred. And maybe there was a time when that was a blazing fire in your being, and it motivated you to embark on the spiritual journey. And that perhaps over the years, that feeling of almost grief or pain, of perceived separation from the source of your desire, the source of love. Maybe that fire cooled. Maybe you intentionally set about a more sober and integrated spiritual process and dismiss those feelings of longing as somehow immature or inferior to a more straightforward and less melancholy relationship with ultimate reality. So I'm inviting you now to re-inhabit that place of longing and to gently blow on those embers that still are nestled in your heart cave and allow them to burst into flame again. Why not? and see what comes from that, what emerges from that renewed passion of desire for union with the beloved. So if you haven't already done so, I invite you now to close your eyes or simply turn your gaze inward, your eyes downcast, and take 3 deep, full breaths. Inhaling all the way, holding the inhalation for as long as you can, and then letting all the breath go and holding the exhalation for as long as you can before breathing in again. 3 times at your own pace. Deep, deep breaths. Feeling that breath washing through every cell of your body. And now placing your hand on your heart center, maybe both hands, however you wish to do this. Touching your own heart center, the middle of your chest, lightly. Tune into that sensation for a moment so that you locate your spiritual heart in your physical being. And take a deep breath now from that place, as if your nose was in the center of your chest instead of the middle of your face. And breathe in and out through your heart center a couple of times. And then just breathing naturally, maybe very lightly even. Focus your attention on the center of your heart. And now please picture the embodiment of the sacred that most resonates with you in this moment. Perhaps it's Christ or Krishna or the Buddha or Mother Mary or Kuan Yin or Kali or white buffalo calf woman. Maybe it is the formless beloved who you cannot personify, and yet who lives, perhaps hidden, deep inside your being. Turn toward that beloved one now and call out, "Come, beloved. Come home to me. Be with me. Fill me. Receive me. Infuse every fiber of my being with your being. Let my heart be broken open by your love. Never to close again. Come. Come, my beloved. I promise not to turn away from you again. Fill me. Change me. Heal me. Ground me and root me. Uplift me. Open the eyes of my heart. Let me rest in you. Take refuge in me. Do not leave me alone another minute. I am yours. And now, having rekindled that flame, open your eyes and return your awareness to this moment with me, with all of us, and carrying that fire of desire into our conversation. Let's begin.
All right. Thank you, Mirabai. That was beautiful. So now we have the rest of our time together to dive into our viewers' questions for Mirabai as we prepare for her upcoming course. Again, that's called Wild Goddesses and Mystics of Mercy, and it begins Wednesday, August 29th. And if you want to check out the website and learn more about the 6-month course, you can visit goddessesmysticsadvanced.com. That's 3 words with no spaces, goddessesmysticsadvanced.com, to see the full description. So let's go ahead and get started with questions. If you have a question for Mirabai, just go ahead and type them in, and I'll be happy to read them aloud. And in the meantime, we've already got some gathered, so let's get started with those. We've got a question here from LaRose, who says, now more than ever, I feel the need to physically participate within a spiritual community, but I live in an extremely oppressed region of the Bible Belt with hopes of moving. Cosmic masses, etc., are way across the country. Do you have any suggestions?
Is it LaRose, Larose?
I believe so, yes. That's how it's pronounced, yeah.
Well, I just read a novel by Louise Erdrich, LaRose. It was excellent. I highly recommend it. It's a great question because community is so essential on our spiritual journey. And many people like you feel isolated in their geographical areas, politically, socially, certainly spiritually. It's hard to find our people sometimes. And so a couple of quick responses. One is the options through online community are incredible. So you've already made a step. Perhaps you've taken shift classes in the past or courses with other online platforms, but I have been just blown away by the depth of spiritual intimacy that can happen and does happen with these kinds of online gatherings, both through the live teachings, but also the community pages where people get to communicate with each other, chat groups, and so on. So cultivate those communities wherever you can. They're not all good. And you'll know, I trust your faculty of discernment is intact and, that you won't fall for the bullshit because there's a lot of bullshit out there, but there's a lot of really authentic spiritual community happening where people are waking up together. And so I urge you to follow your heart in finding those. And this is a really great place to start. And I think there is hope that you will eventually be able to move and go to a place where there's more physical access to these kinds of alternative spiritual communities. But also, I guess, LaRose, what I want to say is that what I have found is that sometimes I find the presence of the beloved in the most unlikely spaces and places, like the most seemingly traditional conservative communities sometimes have a deep and hidden heart connection. And because my heart is the way it is, I can usually find it, and it becomes deeply gratifying all around. So that's just to say not to discount what's right there in your own backyard, because it may be much richer spiritually than you might think with your preconceived ideas of what an alternative spiritual community is supposed to look like. So I leave you with that. Thank you for your question, and blessings on finding your people, starting right now.
Indeed. Thanks for that. Well, as I'm sure you know, your conversation with Stephen Dinan about the two Marys and Miriam really struck the hearts of a lot of people. So we got a lot of questions about Mary. But let me go ahead and start with just one. That this is an anonymous question. It says, what do the Marys have to do with Islam?
Right. Oh, great question. Because I realized after that call with Stephen, I get so excited sometimes I don't even look at my notes, but that I neglected to mention something very important, which is Mary's place in Islam. So Mary is mentioned far more times, Mother Mary, Mother of Jesus, far more times in the Quran than she is in the New Testament. Not everybody knows that. Mary is deeply revered in Islam, as is Jesus. In fact, Jesus is considered to be a Messiah, which doesn't mean in Islam the Son of God, because in Islam God is not a parent and cannot have children. God is beyond all such definitions. But there are prophets, great prophets in Islam, and Jesus is among one of the highest of the prophets in Islam. And his mother Mary is definitely the quintessential woman in Islam. She is the embodiment of all the spiritual, the finest and most magnificent and awakened spiritual attributes. So she is, and she's mentioned more times than any other woman, than by far, in the Quran. So Mary is considered to be a miraculous being who was a virgin and gave birth to the embodiment of love, which is what Jesus, Isa, is in Islam. And she's continuously referred to. I have a passage that I often turn to in the Quran. This is a version, one of my many versions that I have on my shelf of the Essential Quran. It's called the Essential Quran, collected by Thomas Cleary. And the angel said, "O Mary," this is in the Quran. And the angel said, "O Mary, God has chosen you and purified you, chosen you over the women of all nations. O Mary, obey your Lord, humble yourself and bow down in prayer along with the prayerful." Behold, the angel said, "O Mary, God announces good news to you by a word from God, named the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, honored in this world and hereafter, and among the intimates. And God will teach him the book and wisdom, the Torah and the Gospels." That's the thing about Islam that people don't often realize, Westerners or non-Muslims, that the Quran does not discount Judaism, does not discount Christianity. Islam bows at the feet of Judaism and Christianity, and considers itself to be the third of the religions of the book, the people of the book. And so it enfolds the teachings of the Torah, and it enfolds the teachings of what it calls the Gospels of Jesus, and is the third expression or iteration of the recognition of the oneness of reality, what we might call the one God. And Mary is the embodiment of that. She is the reminder of that. She is the vessel for that message in the world.
Fascinating. Thank you for that answer, and Thank you, Anonymous, for the question.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've all learned a little something today. Let's go with a question here from Marjorie, who says, "Can you please speak a little bit about how our pleasure and pain can be perceived as two sides of the same coin, so to speak, and how is it that we can appreciate the beauty that lives within the sorrow and also the sorrow that lives within the beauty?"
You are singing my song, honey. I don't know, my whole life that has been a question that I have really lived. As Rilke says, the important thing is to live the questions. So many teachers beautifully describe this. I automatically thought of Khalil Gibran, the Iranian poet who wrote The Prophet, and talks about you cannot have joy without sorrow, and you cannot have sorrow without joy, and he speaks of it beautifully. But Pema Chodron, a contemporary American woman, practitioner and teacher of Tibetan Buddhism, many of you are very familiar with Pema, talks about that for instance, the pain we have about our own sweet selves, the ways that we judge and condemn ourselves because we keep often, most of us, going back to the same wounds and reenacting the same patterns that have created suffering in our lives before. So sounding familiar to anyone? And she says, so we get on this like self-improvement project. Well, she doesn't call it that. I call it that. But where we're trying to purify ourselves and perfect ourselves and wrestle ourselves into submission so that we won't be like that, whatever that may be anymore. And what we don't realize is that our eccentricities, our neuroses, our wounds are intimately entwined with our beauty, what she calls our wonderfulness, our gifts, and that any attempt to separate ourselves from that which causes pain or embarrassment or shame in ourselves is going to cut us off from our quirky, wonderful, wise beauty that is entwined with that. The same seems to be true for grief. I'm sure that so many of you who are gathered with me right in this moment are carrying great loss, or at least some loss. Some of you, tremendous loss, some of you, smaller losses in your hearts, in your lives, that you have either learned to integrate, or you've pushed aside, or you are coming to make friends with. But that you have tasted this reality of the way in which the pain and suffering in our lives opens us to the beauty of the world. That when our hearts shatter, they become boundless. And our capacity to hold these seeming paradoxes of beauty and terribleness, of pain and exaltation, is greatly enhanced. That by turning toward and not pushing away painful experiences, our hearts are able to contain greater and greater amounts and degrees of wonder and awe and love and compassion. I want to read a short poem by my namesake, Mirabai, the 16th century. Let's see, I'm trying to get this in front of the camera. There we go. God, Mirabai, I'm so dyslexic sometimes. Not that there's anything wrong with dyslexia. But Mirabai wrote, she was in love with Lord Krishna, the god of love in the Hindu tradition. So this is in 16th century India, very deeply devotional, ecstatic time of the bhakti poets, the devotional poets. She writes, my teacher, which is Krishna, the god of love, my teacher shot an arrow. It passed all the way through. Now its absence burns in my heart, in my restless body. My mind no longer wanders. Love holds it hard. My mind no longer wanders. Love roots it, anchors it. Now I am chained to the present moment. Who knows my pain except him? Helpless, unstoppable crying. Friends, tell me, what more can I do? Mira says to her Lord, give me your presence or death. I mean, the mystic poets, Rumi, Mirabai, Rabia, Lala, all of them sing this song of love. And it sounds so painful, and yet they would not trade it for anything. Santa Teresa de Avila, Saint Teresa of Avila, whose great masterworks I've had the privilege of translating, speaks of something that is called in the mystical literature the transverberation. And it was a vision she had of an angel plunging a flaming arrow into the core of her being, and then withdrawing it, and then plunging it in again, and then withdrawing it, plunging it, withdrawing it. Use your imagination, until she went into ecstasy. And she said, I never wanted it to stop. I mean, it was unbearable pain, but the ecstasy was even more. And so, the mystics get a little carried away, and we're going to be getting carried away in this course, I assure you, with this love language, and see if those kinds of ecstatic devotional poems aren't able to knock on the door of our hearts and swing those gates wide open. That was probably a longer answer than you bargained for, but as you can see, it's kind of what I'm interested in. So thank you for asking.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Let's go to a question from Bob. Bob says, I assume that men practitioners are welcome, especially since our world desperately needs to balance the out-of-control masculine with a strong feminine infusion. And it's too many of us men who embody the out-of-control masculine. So basically, Bob is asking, is this course a good fit for men?
Thank you so much for asking, Bob. Yes, we need you. We need men who are awake or awakening to the need for the voice of the feminine to not only enter the spiritual conversation, but perhaps even dominate it for a time. And so I really bow to the men who, and I always have men on my courses, my shift courses on the feminine wisdom, feminine mystics, and I always appreciate it, because when a man is in this sacred space that we are weaving around feminine wisdom, he is outnumbered by far, and the men who are willing to sit in that fire are going to experience what women have experienced in the religious and spiritual traditions across the globe and throughout history, because all of the world's great wisdom traditions have been dominated by and basically constructed for the male experience and discounting the feminine and female experience. We have gleaned great gifts from those religious traditions. I'm not denying that, but it's time for the voice of the feminine to be heard. There are such hidden treasures that the whole world has missed out on because of the patriarchal orientation of the world's religious structures. So for a man to be willing to sit with us in this space, humbly and with an open heart, is a great gift to us. And I hope it will be to you as well, because you're right. All the men that I know are as hungry for the wisdom of the feminine as the women are, if not more so. So yes, you are welcome.
All right, come on in, Bob. And if you're just joining us, we're here with Mirabai Starr, learning about her upcoming course. Again, that's called Wild Goddesses and Mystics of Mercy, and it begins Wednesday, August 29th. And you can log on to goddessesmysticsadvanced.com for all the details and to register. And here's a question I think would be good to follow up, Bob, about the divine feminine and masculine finally mixing together. Kathleen wants to know, she says, I've heard that Mother Mary is actually the Holy Ghost of the Trinity. Have you heard this? And I've actually heard something similar, not so much that it was Mother Mary, but that the Holy Ghost is actually the feminine of the divinity. I wonder if you can address that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a wonderful question. I have heard and also spoken about this in various ways. For me, I'm a trained philosopher. That's my academic background. So I'm always much more interested in the questions than in the answers. Just so you guys know, let's get that taken care of right off the bat, that I'm always questioning everything, and I'm rarely going to give you any kind of solid answer about things that I can't possibly know, nor do I think anyone can, but they're wonderful questions to be asking, and they're enlivening, heart-opening, mind-expanding, consciousness-lifting questions. And that's one of them. So, yes, as Lisa said, many people feel, and it certainly makes sense to me, that the Trinity is the Mother, the Father, and the Holy Spirit. So the Father being the transcendent, the Mother being the immanent. So the Father being that which is beyond all possible conjecture, the boundless, radically amazing, awesome majesty of the One. The Mother being the sacred, infusing every particle of being, here, grounded, embodied, incarnational. And the Holy Spirit being the awareness, the awareness of the sacred in community, in each of us, and in the interactions between us. I think that's a beautiful paradigm to sit with. Julian of Norwich, the great medieval English visionary, said that actually the second person of the Trinity, she called it, Christ, is feminine. So you've got the Father, and you have the Holy Spirit, and then you have Christ as the Mother, because, Julian says, Christ by his very nature is feminine, and therefore is she, not he, because Christ breaks himself open and pours himself out for love of all beings, just as a mother does. That all of Christ's qualities are motherly, nurturing, unconditionally loving qualities, and therefore Christ, or the second person of the Trinity, has to be feminine. So she often calls Christ the Mother, all one hyphenated, one word, Christ the Mother. So there are many ways to look at it, but it certainly seems that it makes heart sense and soul sense to acknowledge that the Holy Trinity, which is actually a very beautiful, powerful symbol that the Christian tradition offers to us, must be equally balanced with masculine and feminine. Good question. And we will definitely be exploring that more together.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Let's go to a question from Harvey, who says, how does this work support the Me Too movement?
Good question. These are all such good questions, you guys. In the same way that I think this work supports the environmental movement and any kind of social justice effort, many activists understandably go toward rage and outrage. I mean, that adage, if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention, really resonates with me. I think when we encounter the suffering in the world, if we just spiritually bypass around it and say we should all just be one and stop being so pissed off and just act with peace and nonviolence, we are bypassing the very real conditions of suffering in which most of the world lives. And also, if we cultivate a direct connection with the beloved in the temple of our own souls and in the sacred space of community, through spiritual practice, through contemplative practice, that is a meditation practice, through singing and chanting, through drinking in the beauty of the sacred scriptures of the world's religions, and primarily through drawing on the wisdom of the feminine. And we bring that to the table of activism, the Me Too movement, for instance. If we come with our hearts open, vulnerable, willing to feel the pain, and yet rooted in our own sense of intimacy with the source, with the sacred, with the beloved, then we have something to offer. We have the strong, embodied, brave, truth-telling woman, for one thing, at our side. Then we know that we're not alone. We actually have this, we are surrounded by a circle of ancestors and angelic beings and the mystics of every tradition who've come before us, and each other alive right now all over the world from all spiritual traditions. That we're holding hands, we're weaving a basket of community, and with that reality, we have something to offer the awakening of consciousness around sexualized violence and oppression of women. So thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you for your response. Let's go to a question here from Safina, who says, the animal kingdom has my heart, but when I consider activism, like working at an animal shelter, I break in two. How do you know what your purpose is? Is it what breaks your heart?
Such a good question. Yes. My dear friend Andrew Harvey has said, this whole Joseph Campbell thing about follow your bliss is great and fine, and it served us well. But what about following your heartbreak? Because when we only follow our bliss, we can be very self-indulgent, right? Obviously. Like, I want to be an artist, and so I'm going to neglect the fact that my neighbors are starving, and I'm just going to express myself. How, Andrew asks, and many of us are asking, how do we allow ourselves to pursue our inner lives, which are life-giving and vital? Meditation practice, artistic expression and experience, but not to the neglect of the rest of the community of life. Well, the way to find what is ours to do, how can we serve in this burning world, is to actually, like we were talking about earlier, with the connection between our suffering and our joy, we must turn toward the pain that's in our hearts. And that means actually cultivating some kind of contemplative awareness, contemplative practice of turning inward and breathing in to the reality of what is, and then asking ourselves, what issues or single issue keeps me awake at night or rides along with me in the backpack of my soul every day? What is it that when I hear about it on the news or I encounter it on the street gives me that sense of, I cannot bear this? There's information in that heartbreak. There is in that what is yours to do. Now, what is ours to do in this world is often hidden in plain sight. And it isn't always just about what breaks our heart. It's also about what gives us joy. So your question about animals is a perfect example. I also am an animal lover. And when I hear about the abuse of animals, I mean, even just saying it right now, I feel like I almost can't stand it. It's visceral. And I've been that way ever since I was a small child. So what's the flip side of that? Like right outside the door of this room that I'm sitting in right now are my beloved creatures waiting for me to finish talking to you so that I can start talking to them. I surround myself with animals, and I have all my life, and they give me unspeakable joy every day. So my heartbreak and my joy are completely entwined, and therefore, I mean, animal rights isn't something that I happen to be actively engaged in, but it sounds like that could be something for you to be engaged in. But I do know that my heartbreak and my joy are interconnected when it comes to animals. I speak Spanish. It happens to be a skill I have. Well, it turns out that I'm being called upon to interpret for the immigrant community here in my own town, and particularly for women who've been victims of domestic violence or sexual violence. And I can help them by interpreting and telling their stories to social services and law enforcement. And I can also protect them from people who would try to deport them or separate them from their families. I can advocate for them. I can help keep them safe because I have this skill of being able to communicate with them. That just sort of came to me because it was clear that I have a love for the Spanish language and Spanish culture. There's a need in the community, and in it fused. So look for that which breaks your heart. Look for that which fills you with joy and aliveness, and see scan for what the needs are. But the most important thing is to begin by turning inward and allowing yourself to truly feel it, not turn away from it. Thank you.
Nice, thanks. That was a nice response. Thank you. Well, looking at the clock here, we have time for a few more questions, but before we take those, I want to give a few details about the course. Again, it's called Wild Goddesses and Mystics of Mercy, Soul Sanctuary. And this is going to be not just a life-changing, but a fascinating 6-month journey under Mirabai's expert guidance, where you'll discover the radical wisdom of women mystics, breaking free from rules and hold on a second. My computer is spazzing on me. I'm trying to find my place. Hold on just a second. I'm sorry about that. Let's see. We've got some bonuses coming up, so I want to make sure that we get to those. Oh, la, la, la. Okay. Here we are. Okay, we're back to this. Okay, the course takes place on Wednesdays at 5 o'clock Pacific, and that starts again on Wednesday, August 29th. And if you can't join us live, as I mentioned at the beginning of the hour, you won't miss the teachings. That's fine. You'll receive audio and video recordings, transcripts, and all course handouts on your course homepage. And also, don't forget that the Shift Network offers a no-risk money-back guarantee on all of our courses, giving you a full 2 weeks until September 12th in this case to make sure you absolutely love it. And as an added option, all participants are welcome to connect in a private Facebook community group so you can stay connected with one another. Also, and here's the bonuses I mentioned, everyone who registers receives the Wild Goddesses and Mystics of Mercy bonus collection. And there's a lot this time. First, you'll receive an audio dialogue with Mirabai and Tessa Bilecki entitled St. Teresa of Avila, Ecstasy and Common Sense. Next, you'll get a recording of Mirabai reading from her new book, Wild Mercy, and this is a sneak preview into her as yet unpublished work. Then you'll receive an audio collection from Mirabai entitled Prayers and Poems to the Divine Feminine. Also, you'll get 2 guided meditations from Mirabai called Awakening the Divine Feminine. And you'll receive an audio dialogue with Mirabai and Sister Greta Runningen entitled Living Love as Modern Mystics. And finally, you'll get 2 additional video teachings from Mirabai for the Wild Goddesses and Mystics of Mercy bonus classes. So before we get back to questions, Mirabai, let me ask, what are you most looking forward to sharing in your upcoming course?
I am looking forward to connecting with that fire of love longing that we invoked at the beginning of the session today, and seeing what happens in our lives, because we'll be in deep dialogue about all of this as we continue to nurture that heart space while exploring these great wisdom beings that we're going to be immersed in. I want to see what your personal experience of heart connection with the beloved is looking like, and how it's unfolding over our time together. I'm excited to see, when we don't just stay with the surface, because the intellectual content can be very delicious and compelling. But I'm really interested in what's going to happen when we say yes to that deep soul fire that we carry.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. Well, we've got a bunch of questions coming in. Let's take a question here. This is from Bhavana, who says, my question is an extension of what you were just talking about before I talked about the bonuses, etc. The question is, I want to know, why do good people suffer tremendous suffering? And when I say good, I mean people who are absolutely in sync with goodness and the universe.
I do not know. I have no answer to that. It's just as bewildering to me as it is to you. I mean, in certain traditions, in the East, in Hinduism and Buddhism particularly, they talk about karma as a law of the universe, a cosmic law in which our actions have repercussions, if not in each lifetime, then in subsequent lifetimes, because in Hinduism and Buddhism, there's the belief in reincarnation. I still find that to be kind of a retributive model of retribution that is, if I dare say, masculine, in the sense that it's like God is some great punisher. And so if we don't have the hell realms that we have in Christianity, we just have unfortunate rebirths where we still get in trouble for what we did, for being bad. I feel like the feminine model is very different from that. And it's going to require a shift in consciousness for all of us, not just men, but women as well, who unconsciously buy into those structural interpretations of human experience from that dualistic standpoint of good and bad and punishment and reward, and instead see that the human experience is saturated with beauty, and it is also shattered by pain, and that they are both part of the full expression of what it means to participate in this web of interbeing. And that for many of us, when we experience great hardship, our hearts are opened more to the pain of others, and we feel more compassion. We're able to act more compassionately, more generously. And we're also given the capacity to perceive beauty, maybe with much greater depth than we were before our shattering experiences. So yeah, I think it's time to reframe difficult experiences as being some kind of punishment, and instead see them as opportunities for awakening and deeper love.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's go to a question here from Thena, who says, I never had a good relationship with the feminine due to early traumas, and am wanting a better connection. Do you have any suggestions?
That's such a great question. Yeah, I think that many of us, women and men, come to the table with mother wounds, that we either didn't have a mother, or we had a terrible abusive mother, or somehow have been hurt by women in our lives. And therefore, it's difficult for us to conjure up a feeling of love for even the goddess beings like Tara or Kuan Yin or Kali or Durga, or even Mother Mary, Sophia, all of these wisdom beings that I'm going to be introducing to you. It's like, yeah, that's actually a strain for me, because the feminine has not been a pretty place in my life. So yes, I strongly feel that this gentle, more contemplative access that I hope to be offering to you in this 6-month sanctuary will be a healing space for whatever wounds you carry around the feminine, and will repair your access, your connection to the beauty of the sacred feminine in your own life. So I don't know if that's addressing your question, but I'm definitely aware that not everybody is blessed with a great start when it comes to the relationship with the feminine. And also for those, from the Catholic tradition, often Mother Mary has been so reduced to this meek and mild mush that she hasn't been an inspiration for women. We're going to reclaim Mother Mary's ferocious, prophetic, unconditional love, and cultivate that as a vital and tangible resource in our own lives. She certainly is for me.
Okay, great. Thank you. And once again, I want to mention, if you viewers have not watched Mirabai's conversation with Stephen Dinan about the three Marys, Mary, Mary, and Miriam, you owe it to yourself. Go take a look at it, because it was just a fascinating conversation. In fact, we've got so many questions about the Marys coming in, and trying to focus more on other things, but people really want to know more about these women. In fact, let me take a question here from...
Yeah, please do. I want to talk about that general Mary thing. But let me hear the question.
I personally think it's because we've never been told what powerful women they were. They've just been sort of characters, just sort of like they're low on the cast, but they were world changers. So yeah. So this question from Michelle says, would you please speak to the idea of Sophia, Black Madonna, and Mary Magdalene, which seems to go beyond the Judeo-Christian paradigm, something more than just feminine energy within a paradigm of patriarchy?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's just go to Sophia first. And so yes, I think that, and this relates to what you and I were just touching on, Lisa, is there is such a hunger in women especially, but I think it's there in men too, for feminine wisdom beings to turn to, because we have had an overabundance of, not just the kind of disembodied notion of God as a dude, but the great saints and prophets and poets are almost all men. So we are looking, where our souls are thirsty for the wellspring of feminine wisdom. And just as you said, Lisa, it's been completely discounted. It's been there all along in all of the world's great religions and spiritual traditions, but has been discounted and marginalized, as women have been discounted and marginalized. So Sophia in the Judeo-Christian tradition is wisdom. She is the personification of wisdom, and she has always been feminine, female. It's so interesting to me that she's spoken of as the feminine in both Judaism, in the wisdom literature, and in Christianity, and yet both of those religions have virtually discounted the female experience and feminine wisdom teachings in general. That a good spiritual woman is a woman who obeys her husband. And that carries over into the third monotheistic religion of Islam. And yet in all three, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all three of those monotheistic traditions, the feminine is like the quintessence of spiritual mastery. Wisdom? I mean, come on. That is spirituality, right? Wisdom. We call them wisdom teachings. And it is feminine. So Sophia is the embodiment of wisdom. We're definitely in the process of reclaiming her. So figures like Mother Mary, like Mary Magdalene, like Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad, these are beings who embody the essence of sacred wisdom. They are like the living temples of the holy as wisdom, expressed as wisdom in the body. So let's dive into Sophia more and more. Read everything you can get your hands on, and we will certainly be exploring Sophia here. The Black Madonna, yes, seems clearly to me to be the embodiment of that sacred quality, attribute of wisdom, of the divine, and so I'm really fascinated with what's going to happen as we begin to explore the Black Madonna together. Because I got to tell you that although I've spent a lifetime exploring the world's wisdom traditions, all of them, and especially the feminine, I learn every time I come together in a circle with other women and a few good men doing this kind of work. So your own Black Madonna investigations, for instance, will be fascinating to me. I want to hear more. I have been to Chartres and experienced the Black Madonna kind of speaking to me. So I'll tell you that story next time.
Okay, thank you so much. Wow, looking at the time, we're just about out of time here. And this has been just a fascinating hour. I think we could talk forever. I want to thank our viewers for being with us today, and for all of your really great questions. Once again, Wild Goddesses and Mystics of Mercy Soul Sanctuary starts Wednesday, August 29th. And again, you can visit goddessesmysticsadvance.com to learn more and to register. And Mirabai, before I cut you loose, do you have any final words for our viewers?
I guess, whether you join me or not for this journey that we're going to be taking together over the next few months, I encourage you to stay with whatever began to arise for you as we did that meditation at the beginning of our session today of reconnecting with that love longing that burns in your heart. Continue, stay with it.
All right, great. Thank you. Once again, thank you, Mirabai. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I enjoyed this conversation. I hope you did as well.
Oh, great questions. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Lisa, for holding sacred space so beautifully. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone who joined us today. On behalf of all of us at the Shift Network, I wish you well and look forward to having you on this course or perhaps another one in the future. Have a great night, everyone.
Oh, that's me. Merkava la shehina.